So Bob, you guys were recently out at doing oral interviews with respect to Hayden Springs. That got me to thinking about the 1896 USGS. The problem with the USGS maps, they're great for showing an inventory of where buildings are, but they don't really tell you what the buildings are. On the other hand, the 1898-1902 maps, the county road maps that were surveyed, are good for actually spelling out the names of landmarks and properties. But the problem is they only call out the ones that they're actually using to do the survey. So it's not a good inventory of all the structures that are in an area. And also, because they're focused on the road, they don't pick up on buildings that are off of the road, interior, half a mile away from the road. So when you guys were doing the interviews, I got to thinking about that, started looking at it, and I thought, let's try looking at a combination of the 1898 county road map in conjunction with the USGS maps. See how well they agree with one another in terms of where things are at. Put some names onto the USGS map. And then also try to get an idea of the population density that was around Hayden Springs. Then in conjunction with that, I've also been rereading the archaeology report that was done for East Metro Park. And there's one site in particular that I think is of interest that we'll talk about because it ties in with the USGS 1896. More on that in a second. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to show you, so I went back through here because I'm going to be working with 3 different maps. So I drew some marks on Google Earth for georeferencing points to kind of demonstrate that the 3 maps I'm looking at are georeferenced pretty close. So the first one here is this is the master map for the 1898 county road surveys, the high level map. But I've zoomed in on just Hayden Springs. So you see here the red places are my georeference points, and they lined up pretty well. Then the next map is the one that we used when we identified the school, and that's the more detailed county road map that goes along with the actual verbal survey that they did. And again, there's the school. It's off a little bit, but this one is manually georeferenced, so it's tough to get everything to agree. So I focus on just these bits here, and let me slide in and out. Okay, kind of see that. One thing in particular that's important to recognize when you're looking at the survey notes, and I'll bring this up again later, is I think this is called Blake Manor Circle. This is the original route of the road. So when you're reading the survey notes, you need to be following this route or some of the survey notes that don't make any sense when they're talking about left and right of the road. So this section was added later. Let me go back to this map, and again, so just to kind of zoom in and out or pan back and forth here, you can see this one. This is one of the ones that the county georeferenced, and I'll tell you what, they did a great job. I mean, it's just spot on with everything I've used it for. And then the third map's going to be the USGS 1896 topographic map. So again, you can see a little bit off here, but there's the old road, and today's road goes down through here. Here's Park Springs up here. So anyway, just to show that they're all kind of georeferenced with one another. So now what I want to do, I want to go back to the 1898, the detailed survey map. I want to go back to the 1898 detailed survey. This is the one we found the school on. And walk through, they surveyed north to south, going down this way, and then it goes down this way. All right. So I want to call out the points that they call out on the survey. Here, for example, is a copy of the survey itself. And so, you know, as we scan down through here, going north to south, there's the school. It passes a shop, the bank store, Hayden property, etc. So that's what I'm going to walk down through this. The first thing is, so Park Springs Church and Cemetery are actually on the county road map survey, but they're just a little north. They're not part of what gets called out on the segment of the map that we're looking at. But here is the cemetery and the church in 1898. So again, back to the survey. So we start up here. Here's Park Springs Church and the cemetery. And then the survey, as you follow it, the next thing we come across, not the next thing, but in terms of things we're interested in here, the school, Sandy Hayden School, Hayden Springs School. Okay, not shown on the map, but called out in the verbal survey is a, quote, shop. And the shop is, this is the section, again, this is the part of the road, the old road, and it's Hayden Springs, Blake Manor Circle Road now. The real road goes here, but this is the county property that we have visited. So it shows the shop probably in here somewhere. And then bank store, it's right there. So that's the key bits off of the 1898 maps, starting from the church, working our way down through here. So now I'm going to turn off the survey map, turn back on the master map. So there's the points as they fall on the larger map. Park Springs School, which is not shown on the master map. The shop here in the old, on the jog here. And then the bank store. Let me pull those off for just a second. So you can see on the master map, property owners. So we got Hayden up here, Hayden here. This doesn't say Sandy Hayden. He had a lot of kids, so, you know, was it in the family? Was it his? Not. The Banks building is here, and then Hayden here. And so pay attention to this one down here, because this is going to come up again. So then the next thing I want to do, and really the point of this, is to now take those points that we know about and turn on the 1896 topo. And so I'm going to do that right here. So we can see where those points fall, right? So close enough for government work. There's Park Spring Church showing up on the 1896 USGS. That is presumably the school. Although, again, the problem with the USGS maps is they don't tell you what they are, so that's why we're combining the two. So this is kind of interesting. So here's the county property today. And the survey calls out a shop. And, you know, we have that old house in here. The house is probably not that old that I remember. I mean, it's an old house, but probably not that old. But I think you were saying the guy you interviewed said he thought this was the Sandy Hayden house in here. Don't know. It's interesting to see that there are actually two buildings shown here. And if we fade in and out, and again, the georeferencing, is accurate within, whatever. But it might show that, so there's the county properties here. Here's the county property. Maybe the other house was, or there was another house somewhere in this area. Don't know. So continuing down, so here we have the bank store. And we know we've got the records on file. The Austin History Center says that there were materials purchased from the bank store to use in the Hayden Springs school. So that's interesting. Which of these buildings? Don't know which one, but it's right there at the intersection to that road. Okay. So one of the things I'm finding interesting about looking at the at the 1896 topographic map, where it's showing presumably more or all the buildings or more of the buildings, is if you look at the density. If you look at the road coming from Manor down to here, this is the highest density area from here to Manor, which are clustered around the school. Even up around Park Spring Church, there's not that many buildings. So a high density area around Hayden Springs School and the store. And you wonder if, you got a school, you got a store, you got a quote shop. Is that the blacksmith shop? Don't know. Kind of makes you start wondering if this is the kind of the center of the Freedman colony, Hayden Springs Freedman colony. And this is the road to Weberville, and we know Sandy had property down there. See, there it is down there. I mean, look at the density. These places where there's high density, you have a lot more construction, a lot more buildings. So something's going on here, right? Okay, so the other thing of interest with the 1896 topo is that it starts to show you things that are off the road, interior into pastures. And so I want to bring your attention to this guy right here. So I've dropped a pin there on that building right there, that structure. And then if we turn this guy off and then go back to the survey map, whose property is that? Hayden. And we can do the same thing with this. So Hayden's up here, Hayden's down here, Banks is over here, and then we've got this mystery here. Mystery building. Okay, hold that thought. So on the current landscape, here's where the 1896 topo map shows that building to be, approximately. So then I went back to the archaeology report, East Metro archaeology report. And there was one site that they looked at. 41 TV 2015, 2015. Look where it's at. So we know this is Hayden property. The archaeologists are saying it's a mixed site. It's got prehistoric and historic. And I'll let you go, read the details on what it says. But it's interesting that if we then turn on that guy, just saying. So the archaeology of this associated with one of the Hayden properties? Is that his house? Is it another one of his houses? I think your interviewer was saying he thought his house was up here. Okay. Is this another one of the properties? Then the other thing I wanted to do with the 1896 topo was to look at the tenant shack. So tenant shack is 2012. You can see the shacks right there. And then if we turn on 1896, you can see it's not there. So if it were the school didn't get moved till after the school closed, what, 1928 is what I remember off the top of my head. So we wouldn't expect to see it here. Likewise, there were a bunch of buildings up more in this area that probably, if you're going to go by the USGS, are after 1896. That's the 4-room house was north in this area. So one way or another, the tenant shack and this stuff aren't showing up on the USGS. To close out, so this one that they brought up in the archaeology report, so this is the 1937 Tobin. So there was a building there in 37. I think the archaeology report put it late, a lot earlier than that. But anyway, it's interesting to see the road over here, how much it's changed. Let's see, I was saying it's interesting to see from the 1937 how much this area has changed. Like here's the Weberville Road down here, and you look at it. So I'd say this probably deserves some more looking at, given it's on his property and given it shows up on the 1896. Or something, not necessarily that house, but something was out there. And then the other thing that's interesting is that, of course, when we got the Tobins the first time, hadn't really paid much attention to this county property, this piece that's the county property now. And here, here's the old road. And then the current road just straightens that out and goes, straight like this. But this is where, presumably, according to the survey, probably the, quote, shop is in here. And on the 1896 map, there are a couple of different structures in here. And then also from what you were saying yesterday, the guy you're interviewing is making a claim that he thought this was Sandy Hayden's house. So again, we probably ought to refocus on this now that we know it's on the 1896 map, and the survey is calling out the shop. And here's one of the examples where if you don't realize that the road is here, when you look at the survey notes, left and right get mixed up because the shop was on the left side of the current road, but it was on the right side of the old road. Anyway, that's it. I thought this was pretty cool, that the archaeologists had looked at this, and this turned out to be Hayden property, and the 1896 actually has a building that's there. That's pretty cool. All right, that's it.